If we want to be a whole person, we have to start somewhere figuring out what it means to be whole and how to go about it. I think the easiest route into wholeness is the one we already know best, and that's our story. Today, I invite you to focus on your story. Begin at the beginning, as the king said to Alice in Wonderland. Go on until you reach the end, and then stop. Today, we're going to begin at the beginning, and, well, we'll get to the end maybe someday, I guess. At this moment, I'm speaking to you from my home study in Cathedral City, California, where I'm at my desk, surrounded by photos, paintings, objects, and a lot of books. All these things, in one way or another, represent tributaries of the river I call my life that began almost 8 decades ago in Horry County, South Carolina, in a town called Conway. I've long wondered how my life might have been different had I been born someplace else or in some other time, or to other parents, into a different family. I'm an agnostic about past lives. I haven't had many intimations, maybe some, of having lived on this planet or some other at some previous time, but I don't outright disbelieve the possibility. But whatever, I do know that a lot about me was determined in this life by the fact that I was born in Conway. Not a little about me was set at the time, too, because the waning days of World War II was when I was born. But before I go on and tell you any more about me, which is only to help you think through your own story, I want to invite you, if you're not driving, to take a few minutes to pause this podcast and jot down a few things about your origins. First of all, where were you born? What number are you in the birth order of your siblings? How many parent figures were in your life, and who were they? Your mother, your father, uh, relatives, grandparents, other people, neighbors. Uh, what was your ethnicity, racial identity, socioeconomic level, and that of your family? What subcultures, such as religion or politics, were in play at the time of your arrival on Earth? And what did you bring with you that was unique to you, like physical characteristics, physical limitations, physical capacities, mental capacities, bodily strength, natural inclinations or interests? Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all are created equal. He was talking about social and political equality, and I agree with him thoroughly. But if we broaden the lens to see more, we realize quickly the inescapable truth that not the players are unequal, but the playing field is anything but level, and the players anything but equally empowered from the moment and circumstances of their birth. I'm a lot of things that I had nothing to do with, and so are you. I'm male, I'm Caucasian, I'm able bodied, and some say intelligent. I had parents who were smart, direct, funny, motivated, talented, and for the most part responsible. But then the plot line of my story gets a bit wobbly. But my dad, who returned from the U.S. Navy several months after I was born, was well on his way to becoming a serious alcoholic. And that dominated our life, and certainly mine as a child for the first decade or so of my years. My mother was the youngest of five and was soon to become the main caretaker of her father, who was well on his way to dementia within a year or two. I was surrounded by strong women, and my mother, my dad's mother, my grandmother, and my mother's oldest sister who lived next door. All of them were enormously important to me. And then the time I was born in was not long after the Great Depression had begun to lift. And as I said, the war had preoccupied the world of the early 40s prior to my childhood. And then the anxiety about communism began to dominate the concerns of my country. Well, back to the family. Mama hadn't worked since she had her first baby 10 years before I was born. And she got a job when I was about 4, and my brother was a little younger, 2 years old. And she arranged for a series of women to come and take care of us while she worked. And two of those women, African Americans, were huge influences on my life and self understanding. I can't begin to even tell you how much. I was the second in the birth order, as I've said, my brother being 10 years older than I, and my other brother 10 years younger. And when a decade separates two siblings, it's the beginning of a new generation. So I'm really the older of two rather than the second of three. And that means that I have many, if not most, of the characteristics typical of a firstborn child. I'm a perfectionist, an adapter, generally a pleaser. Now, not all firstborn children are, but many are. And I brought with me into the world, in addition to all of that, some interests and proclivities that seemed to be a part of my personal portfolio. I wanted to be a preacher from a little kike. I was, according to my older brother and his friends, and a lot of my peers later on, a sissy. I hated that word, but I like to get dressed up in drag, and I have photos to prove it. And interestingly, I got no pushback from either of my parents and none from the women around me. They kind of thought I was cute. But I was to run into real trouble when I started school at the age of 6. You don't go to school with an Aunt Frances acting like a sissy without trouble. Well, I had attractions to everything religious and spiritual, religious music, architecture, story, symbols. I wanted to know about churches, and I wanted to know who they were and where they were and what they looked like and who went to them. All of that stuff fascinated me far more than it seemed to attract other adults or certainly peers of mine, boys especially in my life. And then I was attuned very much, as many kids I guess are, between of the differences between male and female bodies when I was really young. And then there was culture. People accommodate themselves to a culture even when doing so involves giving up some important positions of their own. There's a human need to be in community, and we're like most primates, socially communal animals, and we express it in the way we often, though not always, tailor our behaviors and priorities to meet the community that we want to or sometimes must belong to. Uh, it's not surprising then that our social and cultural origins very quickly supply us with positions, beliefs, values that begin to define how we think and act, speak and feel. Language works to make us reflect our culture. Words and phrases that I still use, I picked up because I grew up in the South. Uh, Regional dialects. And people hear us talking and our accents give us away to strangers. People still ask me, where are you from? Well, I've worked on that accent for a long time. Tastes, clothing, mannerisms, behaviors, all are absorbed year after year, decade after decade as the people are born into communities or join them. Well, communities change, of course, over time, but whatever they are at the time somebody is born into them or joins them is what they're likely going to impress upon those people. And it isn't just the positive stuff. Communities instill in the young and in the new a variety of things, including prejudices, bigotry, hatred, and suspicions of the outsider, of the other, the different. You might be painfully aware of this, particularly if you've ever had to try neighborhood or other society. Think about it. Did you eventually adapt and take on some of the negative attitudes and behaviors of a community? You ever saw that happen? Were you ostracized because you were a Yankee in the South, or black in a sea of white faces? Or maybe you were a Jew in a hotbed of Baptists? Well, there are huge pressures to blend in, to adapt, or camouflage your preferences that don't fit those of the majority. You remember South Pacific? There was a song in South Pacific that got a lot of people worked up. It because it exposed the shadow side of culture, especially American culture, which is ostensibly open to all and egalitarian and diverse. But it went like this: You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught. I find those lyrics chilling. That's exactly descriptive of what's happening these days in our society. It is not new, nor is it peculiarly American. William Sloane Coffin, who was once the chaplain at Yale University, put it this way: the world is now too dangerous for anything but truth, and too small for anything but love. Hate and fear are not helping Homo sapiens survive. Our origins shape us, there's no way around that. But it's also true that we're not bound by the shape we assume in our early years. Nor are we without choices when we confront new communities, new pressures to conform, new challenges to adapt. Learning to accept ourselves includes learning how to employ and skillfully use our ability to differentiate from others, not just our sometimes quick tendency to mimic others or accept their behavior and norms as our own. So, as you look back over your experiences, what do you affirm and prize from your origins? What foundations did you get that continue to serve you well? What was problematic or perhaps even toxic about your family of origin or your native culture? Have you had to let go of some of those things, or have you held on to them? What are some things at your birth that you have been? And as you look towards the future, what do you want to carry with you that has been with you for years? What's still getting in your way? What are you that you cannot change? And what can you change? How might changing your behavior make the world better, safer, kinder, and you happier? Do you agree with William Sloane Coffin's words that the world is too dangerous for anything but truth and too small for anything but love? And if you agree with it, what of truth are you bringing to the world? And how are you spreading love? I ask myself those questions quite frequently in one form or another, and so I'm inviting you to live with them for a while. Just knowing your story is not enough. You have to kind of understand where it is serving you well and where it needs changing if you're going to become whole and wholly the person you want to be. So that's the first episode. This is in a series of of podcasts in which we're going to be talking about our story and different aspects of it. It won't be a chronological kind of thing necessarily, opening up chapter after chapter, but rather a topically based thing. What facets of ourselves do we need to take a look at in order to begin to experience and claim wholeness? And what does wholeness really mean? Remember that it's not a matter of being everything that we are all the time publicly. We can't do that and shouldn't. I certainly don't want to expose all of my dark sides in some way of acting them out, but I don't want to deny them either, because to do that just does not work. So, thanks for listening and thanks for being here. I'm enjoying these podcasts and I'm enjoying thinking about them and eventually inviting people to join us as we talk about these matters. So, stay tuned and leave your comments in the space below or write me, Frank at thesoulinyou.com. Thesoulinyou.com. I'd appreciate hearing from you.